Thank you. Let's just all take a breath, like, ah. And can I take a picture with you? Because you're only on the national stage for the first time, one time. And we're all in this together, in the words of High School Musical. So, here we go. If you got that, then we're a lot cooler now. All right, on three, everybody smile. 1, 2, 3, woo! That was exciting. And I'm glad, because sometimes I accidentally push the button that turns the camera around, and my kids will all be posed and ready, and I'll be like, oh, now it's looking at the trees. But luckily that time I did it right. I'm so happy to be here with all of you, with new friends that I will yet to make over the next couple of days, and old friends that I'm just so thrilled to see, and my family, which are my best friends of all. Ba ba da 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 da. There was a rabbit who loved to sing, and she loved to dance, and everyone loved to listen to her sing and watch her dance. Everyone would gather around except the lion. The lion didn't like to sing, and he didn't like to dance. He liked to complain. And he would just sit there with his arms folded. I don't sing. I don't dance. Well, one day, the lion was sitting under a tree, finding it particularly easy to complain about things. Those days happen. And he heard that song, ba ba da 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 da, and it was coming around the corner, and Lion heard it, and that was it. He said, that's it. Today is the day. I'm going to teach that rabbit a lesson. In 2015, I had a dream. In this dream, I was sitting in a very small auditorium, and I was looking, and there was this man on the stage who was dressed all in black, and he had this sort of black backdrop behind him with different colored scarves and things hanging in the wood. And he was acting out like a play or a story all by himself. And the audience, adults and children, they were just enamored. They were charmed. And I woke up from this dream and I thought, I could do that. I could do that. You see, I was a theater major in college, but with 3 young children, and we were moving and finishing college, I didn't have a lot of time or energy to be on the stage, but I thought I could do that. I could stand up and act out like old stories or plays all by myself, right? So I put on my bandana and I became Miss Mo. And I started, trying to get gigs at daycares and preschools and all these things. Well, in 2016, we moved to Montana. And our house wasn't quite ready yet that we were going to live in. And so for a month, we had to live in this little 100-square-foot cabin, my husband and I, with 3 children, a dog, and 12 rabbits. They were not allowed in the house, and that's another story as to why we had 12 rabbits. Apparently, we had to bring them with us because Montana didn't have rabbits. And my husband took the car and went to work, and my kids took the bus and went to school, and I was home, trapped, wondering why I was living in Montana. But I did have internet access. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I started a YouTube channel, and I started telling stories. Well, along this time, I had gone to college just up the road in Virginia, in southwestern Virginia in the mountains. And as I started doing storytelling in Montana, my friends from Virginia said, there's a little town that does storytelling. And that was when I made a discovery. I had not actually invented storytelling. It's true. There were already people doing it. In fact, there was this little town in Tennessee that had a center all about storytelling. And so when we moved to Montana, I told my husband, I'll go, but I get to have a trip with my mom once a year, just the 2 of us, because my mom and I are really close. And so when I found out about Jonesboro, I said, Mom, we should go there for our first trip. Now, it wasn't at festival time. I didn't even know about festivals yet. Like, I wasn't even there. I just knew there were other people that were telling stories. So we booked an Airbnb, a little bed and breakfast right here in Jonesboro. And there was a storyteller in residence. And her name was Laura Sims. I know, a collective like, right? She was amazing. The lion waited. And the music got louder and louder. And he waited behind the bush. Ba, da, 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 da. Now I know that this crowd can make some noise, because I just heard y'all cheer for the live stream audience. And so when I say the cue, and then the lion jumped out, and then we're going to roar with everything we have, right? Ba da 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 da. And the lion jumped out and roar. Good. And it worked. It scared the music right out of Rabbit. And the lion growled and laughed and said, "Sing and dance now." And then he turned and he prowled away. I was excited to see a storyteller. I was also terrified because I'd never seen one. And I thought, what if what she does isn't what I do? What if I'm not actually a storyteller at all? And so we got in the auditorium and we waited. The lion walked away and the rabbit watched him. And she could not remember the music. But then she heard a beat. And that beat, that was all she needed. Ba, ba, da, 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 da. And as I sat and I watched Laura Sims with all her scarves and her bangles and her beauty and her rhythm, and I thought, I have so much to learn. But something in her beat, it sounded like my beat. And I was a storyteller. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Da-da. And suddenly Rabbit was singing and dancing again, and Lion turned in disbelief and stared at her and began to prowl back towards her. I don't sing. I don't dance. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I don't sing. I don't dance. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then something happened. The very tip of Lion's tail began to twitch to the beat. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. I don't sing. I don't dance. And suddenly Lion's hips started swaying to the beat. I don't sing. I don't dance. And suddenly Lion was singing and dancing. And Lion is moving all over. I don't sing. And Rabbit was doing just what you did. Rabbit was laughing until Lion got closer. And Rabbit could see tears streaming down Lion's face. I don't sing. I don't dance. And Rabbit took her paw and she put it on Lion's chest. And she gave him a beat. And she said, "Oh, Lion, that sure looks like singing and dancing to me." And sometimes I think we look at everybody else and we look at how they're singing and how they're dancing and how they're climbing and how they're playing sports and how they're telling stories. And we think, I don't sing. I don't dance. But we do. We just have to find our beat. Thank you. Thank you so much. So it took me a while to, find my beat, and I'm still finding it, right? And then you lose it, and then you find it, and then it changes pitches, and then you find it again. But as a storyteller, I've been able to go to some really cool places, and I love it, and I've met so many wonderful people. And so one time, I was in Billings, the great state of Montana. Anyone from Montana here? Yeah, probably not, because there are only 7 people in the state. My family. And I was doing a series of school workshops over a couple of days. So I was in a hotel room by myself. And I had watched a lot of Great British Baking Show. And I thought that perhaps it was time to broaden my horizons. And so I looked around in Billings to see what was going on. Not a lot. But there was an escape room. Have any of you ever done an escape room? There's one right around the corner there. If you got nothing going on for the next 3 days, you should give it a try. So escape rooms are really fun. But normally you go, it's like a big puzzle solving experience, right? And normally you go with your family or with coworkers or something to do a team building experience. But this escape room in Billings was having a singles night, which wasn't that kind of singles night. It was just, if you didn't have a group but you wanted to do an escape room, you could just sort of show up. They had this 2 nights a month. They would do these single nights. And you could just come and you would just be paired off in a group. And that sounded brave and daring, like myself. And so I was like, let's do it. So I drove out to the escape room, and about 10 minutes after getting there and sorted into my group, I began to doubt the wisdom of this decision. So much so that before they took my cell phone, they lock them in these lockers because it's like state secrets in the escape room, and so you can't take your cell phone. And before I did that, I texted my husband, and I described my outfit. And I said, this is what I'm wearing, and this is my address. If you don't hear from me in 90 minutes, please alert the authorities. And the main reason was because this little guy, we're going to call him Wheezy, he was very little, and he was probably about 110 years old. And something, I cannot say what, but something about him just made me uncomfortable, right? And it wasn't like necessarily appearance or anything. It was just like the way he looked at me. It was just, and he had this wheezing sort of breath, and he just stood at my elbow because he was like right there and just stared at me. And so I kind of found my way over to the other side of our group as the employee was explaining our scenario, which was there had been a murder, and the man who had been murdered knew the identity of his murderer, but rather than telling the police before he was murdered, he hid the answer in a series of clues in a cabin in the woods. And we had to solve it because, coincidentally, both the murderer and the police were descending on this cabin in exactly 1 hour. That's how escape rooms work. So as she was sort of going through the spiel, I started to evaluate this group that I had just joined. There was this young woman. She was a little shorter than I am and had blonde hair. She was young, and it was strapped down with a bandana, so I knew immediately I liked her. But she was bouncing on the balls of her feet, and her fingers were real twitchy. And she's scanning the room for exits. And I thought, this woman is wanted by the law. There is a history in this woman's past. And so I kind of dubbed her Twitchy, right? And on the other side of me, so it was Twitchy and then me, and then this man that was probably 6'5", and just this paragon of masculinity, right? His shoulders were this wide, and his waist was this wide, and his pecs were more impressive than mine. And they did tricks. They bounced constant. Have you ever seen these guys whose pecs, they just bounce their pecs and it was sort of hypnotizing. I couldn't stop looking, and I covertly started my timer on my watch. And I was yeah, and in 20 seconds, at least 15 times, just bonk, 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 bonk. And I wasn't the only one that had noticed pecs. There was this other young woman that was in our group, and she had also noticed pecs. And she wanted to make sure that pecs noticed her. And she had this long, brown, shiny hair. And in the course of hearing the spiel about our murder cabin, she braided it and unbraided it 3 times. And so she shook it out, and then she braided it over her left shoulder, and then she looked at pecs. And she, tousled it gently, and then she brought it over her right shoulder. And then she took it out, and they were both really mesmerized by each other. So that was nice. They were falling in love. And then the last two people in our group, I could tell they were brother and sister because they had kind of the same face, and they also were wearing matching cargo pants that were super cool in 1987. And they had these huge pockets, lining it, and they were bulging with something. And I'm a curious person, so I just kind of stepped away from Twitchy and Pex and Wheezy and was trying to take a peek. And the sister was closest to me, and she opened the pocket button, and she reached down, and that's when I saw that the pocket was full of non-perishable food items. It was like little Oreos and peanut butter crackers, jerky, and those little buckets of Nutella with the miniature breadsticks. I love those. And she saw me looking, and she reached up and she said, "Would you like something?" And she offered me a Nutella bucket. And I was like, "Yes, thank you." And then I said to her, "Thank you, but literally, we cannot be in here for more than an hour. That's how the rooms work. We only have an hour and they will kick us out. I don't think you're going to need all this food." And she just patted her pockets and looked at her brother, and he looked at me and he was like, "You just never know when you're going to need snacks." And I was like, "Well, I'm staying with you. In case of a hurricane evacuation, I'm in your car." Well, this was our motley crew, right? And now we headed to the escape room. The first room in the murder cabin was like the library. So the employee let us in and reminded us of kind of the spiel, and then she locked us in. But not really, right? Because that would be illegal. And we were all on board with the illusion. But when that woman locked the door, Braids lost her mind. She was hyperventilating. She tried to climb out of the fake window. And Wheezy stepped forward and grabbed her by the shoulders and said, "Calm down." Come on. Never, in the history of ever, has anyone calmed down when someone says calm down. Right? So Braids just takes it up a notch. And she's like, she's screaming and hyperventilating at the same time, which is kind of impressive. And she's freaking out. And Pex was like, "I was born for this moment." And so he stepped forward and he knocked little Wheezy out of the way. He grabbed Braids and he pulled her to his thumping chest. And rhythmically just soothed her. And so she immediately went quiet, and now they were definitely in love and having a moment. Well, while they were having a moment, Twitchy and the Cargo Twins were on fire, right? They had already found a secret drawer and a secret map and all these hidden arrows and used those arrows to find a lot. They were halfway through the first room when I was just watching this love affair unfold before my eyes. Well, they had figured out that the next step was finding clues in this library. They had found this cabinet, and there was a key that was kind of behind this little latch, and the latch had a magnet. And in order to get the key to drop, it was like this big Plinko board, from The Price is Right, where you drop. And it was like that, but you had to go through all these codes and symbols. Anyway, so I had to find a clue in a book that matched the symbol. So the Cargo Twins tasked me with finding a symbol that would be in a book that had something to do with fire and wings. That was the pictograph. So I'm scanning the book titles, trying to find something with fire and wings, and I heard a little cough at my elbow. And there was Wheezy. And I said, "May I help you?" And he looked at me with these watery eyes, and he's like, "I know where that book is." And I said, "That's excellent. Would you like to share it with the class?" And he said, "Well, what's in it for me?" Yeah. And I said, "I don't know if you understand the concept of escape rooms. This is why I love escape rooms, because There's no one winner or loser. We all win together, or we all die in the cabin in the woods together. And I said, that's not how this works. We help each other. And he said, oh, I don't need anybody's help. I've done this room 7 times. I could do it all by myself. Then why are you here? I like to come. I like to watch people struggle. And then I offer help and I see what I can get from them. So I made mental note, do not leave the building until you see Wheezy drive away. Well, it took me a little bit longer than it should have, but I finally figured out it was a phoenix wings fire, So I got the book, I gave the last symbol, they got the little Plinko board up, and they got to the lever, they dropped the key, but it got stuck. It was like, no big deal. This won't even count as one of our hints, because you get a few free hints, right? So I went to go pick up the phone to call for help, but before I even got to the phone, I swear, Twitchy reached in her bandana and pulled out a bobby pin and picked the lock to the next room. I didn't think people could even actually do that. But it was 20 seconds, boom, door unlocked. And everybody's going into the next room, except Pecs and Braids, because they're having a lot of fun in the first room. So we left them behind. And I just followed behind Twitchy, and I was like, that was amazing and terrifying. Now, if you've never done an escape room, I'm not going to go through the play-by-play, but here's generally, how it works. You find a secret drawer. In the secret drawer, there's a little piece of wood. You put the piece of wood in a xylophone, you strum the xylophone, and it hits just the right frequency to launch a mousetrap, and which throws a ball into the wall, and it hits a secret button that illuminates a beam of black light onto a mirror with a coded message. But you can only read the coded message in the frame across the room from that mirror, and you have to lower the frame the right number of knots on the rope, and the only way you know the right number of knots is based on the Morse code that you found on the back of the diploma that tells you the real name of the murderer. Thank you. That didn't actually happen in the room. I just made that one up just right now. I was like, I can't remember, so I'll just make it up. Anyway, at this point, I was really not interested in the escape room. I was in full story gathering mode. And I was especially interested in Twitchy. So I said, that's really interesting what you just did there. Have you done that before? She's like, yeah, really? Yeah, I'm in a club. We break into warehouses and we don't hurt anybody, we just break in for fun. I'm like, that's not a club, that's a burglary ring. And she's like, no, it's just for the thrill, it's just this really fun thrill. And I said, there are other hobbies. I said, so you never touch anything? She said, well, not anymore. I said, please continue. And she said, well, this one time I went into a house and the family had just left. It was a mom and a dad and it was a little boy. And I walked in and I knew they were gone and the house smelled so good. It was like cinnamon and honey. And I walked in and they had this whole bear motif going on. And they even had placemats and they had breakfast. And there was this really big bowl and it said Papa. And then there was this medium bowl that said Mama. And then there was this little baby bowl and it said Baby. And I tried the Papa. It was so hot. And then I tried the Mama, and I just sort of looked at her. And then suddenly, the Cargo twins shouted. And they had solved the last puzzle. We were leaving the room. And I went over to them, and I said, how are you so good at this? And they said, well, we were kidnapped when we were kids. And we had to work together. We actually had to kill our kidnapper. And at that moment, Pecs and Braids re-enter the room, and he's carrying her, and Braids looks at us and says, we're getting married! And Wheezy goes up to Pecs at his elbow and says, could I have your first child? And we all walked out the door into the sunset, and I never saw any of those people again, but I love to tell their stories. Thank you so much.